Welcome to everyone who is attending today. Wanted to thank you for turning up. Obviously on a Wednesday afternoon, as Andrea said, with the storm out there, it's a big effort to show up, and thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of what we're seeing at Executive Performance Partners. As the slide ahead of you says, we're going to talk about how we see teams go from good to great, and what we see out in the world of business in terms of how to create the habits of a high-performing team. Today, we're conscious that we have the late slot, 3 o'clock till 5 o'clock. So we're going to try and keep things relatively fast-paced, and we are going to ask for engagement to come through via chat. Moretta, who is driving our presentation, will also drive that traffic. So the chat function, as Moretta is pointing out there, for those of you who are as technically capable as me, is that little bubble button up there. But additionally, if you would like to contribute in a verbal way rather than just in a written way, please feel free to chuck your hand up, and Moretta will direct us to the right people at the right time. So we might dive into the topic at hand for today. So today's topic, as mentioned, is really taking teams from good to great. And at Executive Performance Partners, we call it EPP. At EPP, we focus really heavily on how do we create those habits around leadership and performance. And today we're really going to take a lens of what are the habits of high-performing teams and what are our top tips in terms of transitioning from good to great. There's a little bit of a quote here that we like to talk to, which is from Phil Jackson. For any of you who've got Netflix at home, The Last Dance it's a great documentary on high-performing teams and the culture around it. Phil has many claims to fame, but he's probably most famous for being known as Michael Jordan's coach, which makes this quote for us even more meaningful when he says that the strength of the team is each individual member, and the strength of each member is the team. And to us, that really defines what high performance is about. It's really about alignment and making sure that whatever team you're in or whatever team you are fortunate enough to be leading is going to operate at the speed of the individuals and the team, and you need to be able to consider both. And today we're going to talk around how you bring both individuals and teams up to that high performance. So today, and we talk a lot, and I'll introduce the team in a moment, we talk a lot about scorecards for success. So we thought we should practice what we preach. For the next 90 minutes, we really want to be able to talk around what we believe success will look like for today. And actually, we believe at EPP that these sorts of sessions, success today is actually defined by what you do tomorrow. And so we're going to talk about not what you learn today. That's really interesting, and hopefully you take some nuggets of gold away from today, but more about what are we actually going to do tomorrow? Because for us, habits are not knowledge, and we'll talk about the difference, but it's really about what behaviors you do tomorrow that start to build up those high performance habits as leaders or even as members of high performing teams. So our top 4 goals that we're going to set ourselves, and we're hoping that you hold us to account on, is being ready to practice and apply at least 2 to 3 actions immediately post-session. Now, immediately post-session at this time of day, probably might be as you're leaving the office or even heading back into home. We believe that habits, when truly formed, actually apply as much in the workplace as they do in our personal lives as well. So we're going to encourage you to actually do something differently immediately after this session. Secondly, we're going to talk about understanding the difference between coaching and performance partnering. So we call ourselves executive performance partners. And a lot of times people ask us, what does performance partnering mean? And we're going to talk about that and how you can leverage that concept in your team. And as a leader, being a performance partner for taking your team from good to great. We're going to talk about learning today, but we're also going to talk about how we apply these practical tips to unlock performance and how others, most namely our clients at EPP, have applied these tips. And we're going to share some success stories and some case studies with you around how this has really resulted in small businesses growing nationally, national businesses growing internationally, and even ASX businesses going from market competitive to dominating the industries that they're playing in by applying some of these tips. So whether you're got a headcount of 5 in your business or 70,000, which is the range that our clients play across, these tips are equally important. Whether you're a leader or whether you're a team member, you can apply these things. And then finally, we're going to give you an opportunity to ask any of your burning questions about how to go from good to great during our Q&A session. So while we will field comments and please feel free, if you're joining late, to put your hand up using Teams. At the end of today, as I've said, we're going to try and present for no more than 90 minutes and allow time for discussion at the end of today's session. So please write down your questions. There's nothing worse than getting to one of these end of these sessions and hearing that sound of silence. So any questions you have, please feel free to ask. And of course, following today, we will send through information around what we're going to talk about today. And our client experience team also have some resources that you'll be able to access.
So just a quick call out while we change slides. If you have any questions or expectations or hopes or dreams for what you would really like to get out of the conversation today, please feel free to jump into chat and we'll just check in on that from time to time to make sure that we're giving you exactly what you need.
Absolutely. So before we launch into who are we, I thought it was useful for us to flag our connection with Beta and BBH, or Brisbane Business Hub, that we're all part of their community. We were one of the incubator companies for Brisbane Business Hub. We spent many a time in our early days with Miriam and the team in the Brisbane Business Hub and starting to create those connections within the Brisbane community, which is, of course, where we're headquartered, while we have international and national clients. As you can see from the storm behind me, we're still very much Brisbane based. So we've had a long-standing connection with Beta and Brisbane Business Hub. We've been part of their incubators in terms of access to legal advice, marketing advice, branding advice. And for those of you who are new to the community, really encourage you to get involved. Been incredibly useful for us as we've grown very rapidly and very early. We're too noisy and got booted out of Brisbane Business Hub. But just last week, took the team back there to do some strategy work. So we've still got a strong connection with Beta and Brisbane Business Hub. The two faces that you'll see on the screen, unfortunately, this one, which is a face for radio as opposed to a face for video. My name's Dave. I'm the CEO at Executive Performance Partners. Started the business in one form or another back in 2019 and grew the business particularly through COVID and last year. So I started life as an organisational psychologist, which is actually where I met Andrea back at University of Queensland. And we've come through both the consulting and the executive route, working with people performance. Andrea, who will be co-facilitating with me today, if she can get a word in edgewise, is our Chief Operating Officer. We're not allowed to call her our chief nerd, but she really is. She's the brains behind the operation and really is leads the team that brings this thought leadership to you today. So who is EPP? Very briefly, I never like these presentations that talk a lot about who they are before they talk about why we're all here. But very briefly, executive performance partnerships as a model brings together strategic consulting, that traditional coaching and mentoring to bring together what we call performance partnering. We see performance partnering as an evolution of executive coaching. Our points of difference is we talk about how we lift performance, not just develop executives, how we embed long-standing sustainable leadership habits, not just ask good questions. And our performance guarantee down the bottom talks about we guarantee results, not just billable hours. And I won't go into a lot of detail on us, but after 3,500 executive months under partnership, we're really excited to say that our clients are seeing the results of this partnering. And we had a 99.4% success rate last year with clients achieving their goals, which we're going to talk to you about how they did it. So performance partnering is really the bringing together today's webinar. It's really how do we help our clients to identify what are the high performance habits that they and their teams need to do to grow performance from good to great. And as we say, our point of difference is we put skin in the game. If our clients don't win, if they don't succeed, then we don't believe that we're truly performance partnered, and we won't bill clients for those examples. And as I said, last year, we had a 99.4% success rate, but no one's perfect. So we believe that performance partnering really takes the attention away from traditional coaching, where all of the care came from a traditional coach, but all the responsibility sat with the clients. We believe that that ownership is absolutely critical. We use proven executives to do an unlimited on-call coaching model that leads to actions and accountability, and ultimately is measured in performance. So if our clients don't go from good to great in their metrics, be it revenue, customer, team, whatever is important to your business, then we don't believe that we've delivered on our commitment around that performance guarantee. But enough about us, let's get into the topic. At Executive Performance Partners, we are going to talk today a lot around how do you form a high performance habit. And there's a lot of research. Google's a wonderful resource. Universities are great thought leaders around this. But when we started out the business, we really felt that there was a lack of understanding of almost the mythology of how do we build habits. We all have habits, whether they're eating that chocolate biscuit on the couch at 9 o'clock at night, trying to establish our running routines early in the morning, which I'm struggling with at the moment, or whether it's saying too much when we present in webinars. We all have these habits, and we talk around how do we help our clients to identify the habits that aren't working for them, identify the habits that they need to put in place to replace those to go from good to great. And we talk about our 5 lenses. Our 5 lenses does start with the coaching lens. The analogy we use here is if we're trying to deliver high performance through the analogy of a team with a problem or a broken bone, executive coaching is a wonderful way of understanding where is that bone broken, asking really good questions of your teams to understand where they're at, why they're struggling, what's going on, where the performance issues are. Executive coaching is absolutely critical, and we're not here to criticize that model at all. All that we say is on its own, an X-ray won't fix the bone. So our 5 lenses then goes from how do we move from coaching to mentoring? How do we start to tell that person that we're working with as a performance partner, whether you're their leader or whether it's one of our performance partners, how we've seen situations like this in the past and how we've solved it, to give them a sense of confidence that this problem is not insurmountable and we can easily overcome it. So we move from coaching into mentoring. We then talk about advisory. So once we know what the problem is and we know that we can solve that problem, the 3rd lens then says, how do we advise them? How do we educate them? How do we teach them around that habit or that behavior that may solve that problem for them? We're going to talk about some of the habits today, but this is where we introduce the learning element. This is when we talk about changing knowledge. In the first two stages, we talk about awareness and confidence. The third stage talks around how do we lift knowledge in that individual who's struggling with a performance issue. But on its own, that's where education in leadership is typically stopped. And we all have great knowledge like this webinar, but then if we don't go and apply it, that's when it just stays as knowledge. And we all have that moment when we go to webinars like this, where we go, yeah, Dave, I know that thing. And we go to our clients, well, if you know it, why aren't you doing it? And if you've done it, why didn't you do it when things got tough? And that's the science of habit forming that we're going to talk about today. So the final two lenses of how do you form a habit, once you've gone through identifying the problem through coaching, building confidence through mentoring, and educating through advising them on the tip they need to work on, is then applying it in a problem-solving sense. So sitting in a room going, how would you use that habit? How would you use that tip in a real-world situation that you're challenged with right now, but in a safe environment where they can play with the idea and do it in a conceptual problem-solving way? Because of course, as soon as we've learned something, it's challenging to go and try it without having played with it in a safe environment. So we talk about that problem-solving lens. But then, of course, the final lens is around accountability, holding that individual to account to be brave enough to go out and try that behavior, to go out and try new things, because we know that forming a habit means we have to go from awareness to knowledge, knowledge into behavior, which is applying it. And then through repetition, those behaviors become habits. That's where accountability sits. So when we talk today about our 5 lenses, this is our secret sauce. This is our methodology that we talk about. And we're talking about when you're looking to form a habit for yourself or for someone else, where are you in this 5 lenses? Do we know what the problem is? Do we have the confidence to tackle it? Do we have the skills to tackle it? Have we tried practicing this in a safe environment? And then are we safely holding them to account to go out and be brave and practice this through accountability? So what makes a high-performing team? And a little bit of a behind the scenes, as we were preparing today's webinar, we debated that word makes quite a lot, because when I saw this slide, I said, well, what makes a high-performance team? To me, talks about attributes that team has. It might be commitment, it might be communication, it might be clarity. But of course, they are attributes of how a high-performing team operates. But today we're not going to talk about what does a high-performing team look like. We're actually going to talk about what is the secret sauce to form a high-performing team. And so our research, at the end of the day, psychologists in the room did a lot of research around, well, what do all high-performing teams go through to go from good to great? What are the key pillars that every high-performing team goes through to go from formulation to high performance? Whether you're astronauts, whether you're All Blacks, whether you're Apple, the 3 A's on this slide, or whether you're thinking of another high-performance team right now, our research shows us all of these teams go through the next 3 components that we're going to talk about. And we believe that this is the formula for creating good to great, or our formula for success. Our research and our experience and our clients have all said, if we do not have these 3 elements, we cannot go from good to great. We cannot form a high-performing team. High-performing teams all share a common objective. That doesn't mean that we share a common purpose. Our purpose can actually differ, but an objective is a point on the horizon that we're all heading to, a goal, an outcome, an objective, if you like, that we are all striving towards. With the astronauts, it might have been landing on the moon. With the All Blacks, it might have been winning the World Cup. With Apple, it might have been changing the way that people interacted with computing technology. Doesn't matter what your objective is, it matters that the team is aligned and heading to the same point on the horizon. Secondly, is that we all share the same mindset of high performance. We're going to talk about mindset, and it's challenging. And sometimes people think it's a bit of a murky topic. Our research and our experience tells us it's actually not that mysterious. There are some very practical things we can do as leaders and as individuals to share a high performance mindset and to build that habit of a high performance mindset, which links to the final point. High performance teams, clearly we've got the soundtrack behind us with the thunder going on. High performance teams all share the same habits. They understand that these are the things that we do together to achieve high performance. The objective provides the where are we heading. The mindset provides that collective approach, but the habits are the behaviors that tie us all together that deliver that final objective. And we're going to talk about some practical tips on how you can achieve all three of those pillars. So, first two objectives. Put simply, what is objectives in the concept or in the environment of going from good to great? We believe that objectives mean that we learn how to effectively outline what success looks like for you and your team. If you and your team don't have a common understanding of what success looks like, it's incredibly difficult, in fact, we'd say impossible, to become a truly effective high performance team. But day in, day out, we sit with leaders who go, yeah, I'm absolutely clear on where we're heading and what our objectives are. But when we ask, are your team on the same page, literally on the same page? We're met often with, I think so, or silence. And we're going to talk to you about how you move from I think we're on the same page to I know we're on the same page. We're going to talk about how we identify the measures for those successes that really count. We're not going to do this in an academic, abstract way. We're going to talk about the metrics that matter in your business. For some of your businesses, it might be revenue. For some of it might be engagement with your team or your customers. For some of you, it might be a purpose-driven approach. But we have to be able to measure it, because if we don't have measurement towards that end objective, we actually lack clarity as a team on where we're heading and how we're going. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you set a scorecard for success and how you can start today. Quite literally, if your motivation is high, sitting around with a cup of tea this evening, we can help you to start to build that scorecard for success that sets your team in the heading in the same direction when it comes to objectives. So how do you do that? First and foremost, we have to set a clear direction. All high-performing teams that we know of know where they're heading and can clearly articulate that in a common language. This means that there's a set of objectives that they're striving towards, that everyone has a role in delivering on, and everyone has a stake in it, or what we call skin in the game. The old analogy, the old story here that talks about this is when JFK was walking through NASA for the first time and he was examining the facilities. He walked up to the janitor and asked him, "What's your job here?" And the janitor didn't talk about sweeping the floors or cleaning the benches. He said, "My job is to put a man on the moon." That's a great example of having a shared and clear direction. While his job might have been to make sure that they had a clean work environment, he shared a clear direction of where that organisation was heading and clearly had a skin in the game. Now, for those on the call, I challenge you to think, if you walked into your workplace today and asked any of your team members, "What's your job here?" would they talk about what they do or why they're doing it? Would they talk about what their task is or what their direction is? And we know high performance teams talk about their direction, their objective. So what's the benefit of having aligned objectives? First and foremost, it empowers team members and enables them to feel empowered, as I mentioned in the previous example. It creates a sense of ownership towards the end goal. It's not management's goal or leader's goal or someone else's goal, but they buy into, I've got skin in the game. This is about me. It aligns the team. So in those moments where we get confused and it gets difficult and we have to make tough decisions, it provides alignment to the team around what decisions we need to make, why we need to make it, and gives us a compass, or as Marita has put here, an arrow towards where are we heading. It creates a sense of motivation in the team. There's nothing more motivating to know where we're heading, and we're going to talk about how we celebrate those successes. But first, we need to know where are we heading, where are we at now, and how are we going towards that goal. And it talks to these concepts of team culture and teamwork. When you talk about culture and teamwork, it is absolutely imperative to have alignment. And the best way of testing for alignment is not necessarily just how do we get along with each other, but are we actually all pulling in the same direction? And this impacts on both the client experience, but also the employee experience. We'll talk a little bit about that in some of our examples. Misalignment in teams. Don't know if you've ever been in one of these. I'll put my hand up and say I've been in a misaligned team before. You might have personally experienced, and you'll know you're in a misaligned team when you feel that breakdown in communication. We're just not talking the same language. You're seeing productivity lower than it used to be, or lower than we want it to be. That's a good indication that alignment may be a challenge. That links to performance, but also productivity. And of course, that leads to a lower sense of morale or motivation, and can start to see, particularly in the era of the great resignation that we're all talking about, higher staff turnover, lack of efficiency, and ultimately become systemic. We become bogged down. Decisions become hard for us to understand, and we can't adapt to different markets or different conditions. And of course, in the world of COVID, we've all heard it before, but we're constantly having to adapt at a rate that we're not used to. If we're doing that and we're pulling in different directions, it becomes incredibly tough. So misalignment in teams is a critical issue. So what do you do about that? You can ask yourself these two questions. Do I know what our objective is, both at a team, departmental, and organizational level? Not what my personal one is, but where are we heading? What is the collective objective to which we're driving towards? And if you know the answer to that, then ask yourself the next question. If I asked any of my team members right now what our objective is, would they all have the same response? If the answers to those are no, in either case, there's work to do, but don't despair. We're going to show you how to do that bit of work right now. So how do you set really good objectives? And really good objectives aren't just grow the business or be a bit better this year or make our customers a little bit happier. Tip one of going from good to great says you set your objectives with these 5 key tips. Now, please don't feel the need to scribble these down. We will send these all out to all attendees. But the first part is define what success looks like and harness the power of appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is just simply, what does success look like? We're truly stunningly successful. How would we know? What would success look like? It might be to double the business this year. It might be to enter a new market. It might be to sell our business. Whatever it might be, it has to be a moment in time of where we can define success. Secondly, we want to talk about this concept of lead and lag indicators. And a lot of our clients get confused and frankly a bit frustrated with the lead and lag indicator language. We talk about with lag indicators, it's the best way of measuring the lag indicator is think of it as performance. How we know if we're performing. It might be sales, it might be customer satisfaction, it might be growth, it might be a product that we're releasing, but it's an outcome. A lag indicator or a performance indicator is an outcome which has a measurable end goal. That's great. A lot of clients get to that point. This is where it starts to drop off. And this is where we start to see our clients go, right, I understand why I should be doing this stuff now. Once we've got that lag indicator, we actually have to understand what our lead indicators are. And again, a lot of clients get confused with this. We think of lead indicators as just measuring the inputs that drive towards that performance. And for want of any other analogy, not knowing who the members are in the webinar, if we use sales, While sales performance is a lag indicator, the number of customers that we meet with might be a lead indicator. And a lead indicator, the number of customers we meet with, might be the number of clients or customers that we call to catch up for that coffee. So if we keep telling our teams drive sales, but we don't tell them what the behaviors are that will lead to that, we can get a lot of frustration and misalignment. Then, as leaders and business owners, it's important that we measure that those lead indicators by success. Might be call 5 clients and book in 3 client meetings this week. That's not going to get sales performance, but it's going to be something that's measurable that gives us early confidence and clarity. Fourth tip is be realistic around what is your current baseline of performance on these key measures. Where are we at now? If we said that's good, what's a reasonable gap to great? Now, reasonable doesn't have to be a lay down misère. It doesn't have to be an absolute certainty, but it also shouldn't be shooting for the stars and hoping for the moon. What the science tells us of setting objectives is if your team is somewhere between 70 to 85% confident that they can achieve that goal, that's in the ideal range of motivation. Anything more than 85%, it's kind of, yeah, we'll get there, that's easy. Anything lower than 70, and then probably not going to buy in when it gets tough. They're probably going to fall off in motivation. So it's a really great question to ask when you're setting a goal with a team member. How confident are you of achieving that goal? And if their answer lies somewhere between 70 to 85%, you know you're on to a good start. And then finally, identify the key behaviors that will bridge that current performance from good to great. So in sales, we talked about sales performance being a lag indicator. It might be that the behavior, the lead indicator for that is how many meetings we have, and the behavior might be picking up the phone and talking to our customers. It's the behavior that we can support our team to do that will then be measured by the lead indicators that will result in the lag or performance indicators, if you like. So really simple, start with the end in mind. What does success look like? Measure that success, understand what leads to that success, and then identify the behaviors. And we're going to talk about how then we build out those behaviors or those habits so that they can be successful.
So there's a little bit of dreaming here and a little bit of science here. You notice points sort of 2 through 5 are pretty pragmatic. They're kind of measurable, structured, planned, organized, pretty analytical. That first step around appreciative inquiry and thinking about where are we going, what's our objective. One of the things that we know top performing teams do is they're pretty good at putting themselves in the future and really feeling what that is and what that looks like. I was talking to one particular client about this morning, and he was like, that's the fact that we've done that. I now want to make some bigger, bolder steps, or my plans are going to be different to coming inside out or coming now and projecting forward. There's a lot of value to putting yourself into the future, to thinking about where you want to be, to being a little bit aspirational and dreaming about that, because it makes you be a little bit bolder. It helps you be a little bit more confident. It really inspires that sense of aspiration. You know, if you want to get there, you need to do a few more things than if you're just after some incremental or mildly iterative change or upticks in performance.
A really good point. So that when we talk about performance, there is a vision element or a dreaming element, as Andrea talked about. We need to understand what success looks like. And then once we've been able to understand that moment of success, the landing on the moon, the winning the World Cup, the launching the iPod from the earlier slide, we can then work backwards from that goal. And we talk about at EPP, we are not here to be the thought leaders of leadership. We leave that to big, bold minds around the world. We're here to talk about how to turn that concept into reality. But that's a really good example of that concept from leadership literature of starting with the end in mind and then working backwards. We know if we start from today and work forwards, we never quite get there. We have to actually dream or conceptualize of success and then work back through how would we measure success? How would we measure the lead indicators of that? And therefore, what are the behaviors as a leader I need to work on with my team? So Why would you build a scorecard for success? You've now sat down, team, and you've gone, I know what success looks like. I know what those lead indicators are. I know what the lag indicators are. I know what the behaviors are. Right, let's crack on and get it done. We actually believe there is a critical step that most of our clients seem to miss around here, which is committing this scorecard to writing. And we're going to show you what a scorecard looks like at a high level conceptual stage today. But the advantages of writing this scorecard down is it provides clear objectives in a very non-subjective way. If I ask us all to imagine right now a blue house, we're all going to imagine different blue houses. But if I show you a photo of a blue house, we're more likely to have the same vision of where we're driving towards, what success looks like. So committing it to in writing sounds like a little bit of hard work, but it's absolutely critical to make sure that you and your team are 100% on the same page of what success truly looks like. And even if you're not, it allows for them to then go, well, I'm not sure I understand that part. That's a great conversation for you to have with them because this is a moment of alignment. It then allows you to set clear measures for them and for yourself. And it also explains to them why you're setting these measures. If it's about lifting sales performance, as mentioned before, then it tells them why you're working on picking up the phone and setting meetings with clients, because we know that that leads to the right number of meetings, and we know that the right number of meetings leads to the right amount of sales. But if we just tell them to pick up the phone and they've got to make 27 phone calls today, they're very likely to lose motivation and line of sight to that end outcomes far too quickly. So we talk about working backwards, those clear measures, and it shows us why those clear measures are good, not just for you, but for us. It explains the why of measurement. And then finally, provides clear accountability. This enables you or your team to be accountable for their success. If we put it in writing, we commit it down, we tell other people about it, the research shows us we're about 84% more likely to achieve a goal when we write it down and we tell someone else. Now, this is what a scorecard for success ultimately is allows us to actually commit this to writing. Miranda, yep. So we're not going to give you a big, long scorecard for success. You'll see here we believe in simplicity. We talk about our 3x3x3 approach. 3 themes, each theme has 3 goals, and it's measured over 3 months. The reason for the 3x3x3 is that's about as much as humans can take in effectively, and everything you add on top of that actually detracts from performance. So your themes might be sales, customer, and team. And within customer, there might be something around customer growth, customer satisfaction, customer retention. So 3 clusters, each having 3 measures. And then we talk about setting performance over the next 3 months. Anything less, we know that we're not going to form habits around it. Anything more, and it just seems a pipe dream. And we've all had those moments where people are talking about their 2025 plans and going, yeah, that sounds great, but what are we having for dinner tonight? We know that humans can play in that 3-month range. One of the resources we'll make available for those who are interested is what does a scorecard for success look like? And if you don't have one for you and your team, really encourage you to play with this concept. It's a great way of creating that alignment and those objectives that we talked about earlier.
Getting that alignment is infinitely more likely if you go through the process of building the scorecard in collaboration and in conjunction with your team. You may well be able to just quickly nut it out and go, yep, this is what we're striving for as a team, everybody, and present that. It has a very different feel to actually getting people involved, and it also means that if everyone's in the conversation, you avoid those semantic challenges where somebody thinks blue is blue and somebody else thinks it's red, for example.
And we put some real world descriptors in there around what do these mean. So themes and goals are relatively well known in business, but a lead indicator, how will I know when I'm making progress? A lag indicator, what will I notice when I'm achieving success in this area? And then progress. And this is a critical part, is having that shared progress. We're going to talk about celebrating success in a moment. So for this individual, they're at 80% of their target with 50% of the month left to go. That's a moment to celebrate. And those small moments of celebration are critical in the pathway to forming habits, which we're going to talk about in the next sections, which of course you'll get more of Andrea's voice than mine. Let's bring this to life. So one of the customers that was an early foundation client for us was a brand called U-Foods. For those of us who have gone into Coles or gone into the service stations, or in fact had U-Foods delivered to your house, they were a brand that were started about 11 years ago out of a garage here in Brisbane. Sounds like a great beta or BBH success story. And U-Foods was a first mover in an interesting new industry, which is these ready-made meals. As we all battle the storm on the way home, and we can't be bothered dropping into Woolies, and we want to have a healthy, nutritious meal. That the vision for U-Foods was to make that healthy eating accessible and convenient for what started as Australia. We started working with U-Foods in 2019 and worked with them through 2020 and 2021. And if you, on our website, there's a lovely case study. You'll actually see Lance there. That's a snapshot, him being interviewed by a journalist around what was different that meant that U-Foods went from being a $20 million business after 9 years to a year and a half later being a $45 million business, a year later listing on the ASX for $70 million. And then a great Brisbane success story was so successful on the ASX that a global business called HelloFresh came and bought them in November for $125 million. If you actually asked Lance, the CEO and the founder, what changed in those last 2 years or 3 years, he talks heavily around alignment and objectives for his top team. In the past, U-Foods was a collection of well-meaning individuals who may not have had the alignment that they share right now. But we started working early with them around, well, what does success look like? How we measure it and how we monitor progress on the way there. And Lance and his team, who we work with, the whole executive team, are gracious enough to say that, you know, the work that they did with the EPP in terms of setting those objectives, working on mindset and building habits has been critical in going from 20 million a few years ago to 125 million valuation and being recognised globally as a global leader in ready-made meals out of the Brisbane backyard. So it's a great case study. There's Lance tells it better than we do. There's a lovely video online. I think he's interviewed for about 12 minutes, and a fascinating story into how you can turn these theories and these concepts we're talking about today into real world practice that they live and breathe each and every day at U-Foods, and now starting to see played out across the HelloFresh environment globally. So we now have clarity of objectives. Congratulations, you have the first steps of going from good to great. Your team is moving towards being a high performance team. But where we start to see that progress slowing down is when we're challenged by mindsets, either our own mindset or the mindsets of our teams, or in fact our customers or suppliers. Today, we're going to understand how having the right mindset can actually lead to peak performance. And how do we shift to this thing called growth mindset? Not sure about you, but I've heard about growth mindset from everyone up to and including my aged auntie. And there's such different variations on what growth mindset is. We're going to give you what we believe is a practical and pragmatic way of actually applying a growth mindset as a leader and in business. So, Andrea, when we're talking about what's my 51%, we've all been in a team environment, and we've all seen two people who share a task or share an objective. It might be as simple as my beautiful partner and I, who's going to put out the rubbish bin on a Monday night. And of course, we sit there, be it at home or in work, and we wait for the other person to do that shared task. That task that's 50-50. We own it together, don't we? It's a 50-50 task that we share. What would we coach someone through in terms of talking about what's my 51%? You're on mute.
Which is the catch cry of 2021 and 2022. I think that's a very interesting example, because the first thing I would suggest is maybe it shouldn't be a shared accountability. Maybe it should be, one primary responsibility holder. But to your point, you've got this situation where everyone's kind of waiting for somebody else to go first, right? And it gets really frustrating and it gets really annoying. And you're like, why aren't they doing that thing? And nothing's happening, nothing's happening. What's my 51% is really about saying, well, okay, how do I nudge over the line and take a little bit of responsibility, take a little bit of action here? I'm not going to say I own the whole elephant, but I'm going to take that first step. The visual that always comes to mind for me, and this is going to really probably show my age, is, old school dances, guys on one side, girls on the other. Girls are like, why aren't the guys asking me to dance? And the guys are like, I'm too afraid to ask the girls to dance. Nobody's dancing, nobody's having any fun, nothing is happening. All it takes is one person to take a step or two in the opposite direction. And that could look like asking a question. What do you think is going on here? What do you think the next right step is? I've made the assumption of X. How does it sit with you? So looking for one small little thing that you can do to nudge over that line so that something starts to happen. And usually that's about opening a dialogue.
Fantastic example. And we see this playing out in teams. We see it playing out with our customers. We see it playing out with our suppliers, where we see a lot of energy and angst spent with someone waiting for that other party to just make the first move. What we know with high performance teams is that they share a mindset of 51%, that even if it's a shared accountability, they're looking for the opportunity to be the first one to move, to be the ones to take that first step. Because we know that that first step, while it's the hardest, actually starts that journey. And so much energy and angst is wasted in this mindset of it's 50-50, why aren't you doing your bit? What we see high performance teams absolutely operating with is that mindset of it might be 50-50, but where's my 51%? Where's that 1% that starts the process? Because we know psychologically, once someone does something positive, we're naturally wired to mirror that and to respond in a positive way as well. When someone does something negative or doesn't do something, we're wired to mirror that behavior. So we talk about that, what's that 51% when we're talking with leaders and they're going, the IT department just won't do X. Sorry if there's any IT folk on the line. We talk around what's your 51%? What have you done to take the first step in that process? Because of course you could argue until the cows come home that it's their responsibility to take that first step. But what we know in teams is when that happens, no one wins. So when you're frustrated or something feels like it's stagnated or you're waiting on someone else to do something, the mindset that we would challenge you to go from good to great for high performance is, where is my 51%? And it's an incredibly easy thing to say to yourself, and frankly, a great thing to build into team cultures that overcomes that sense of stagnation or blame that we see really bogging down organizations who aren't quite in that high performance realm just yet.
And when you've got a shared sense of objective and you know where you're going, if the broader team see that a particular metric or something on that scorecard isn't ticking forward, if they've got this 51% mindset, then often someone who is quite tangential to that particular piece might stimulate a conversation, might ask a question, might kind of nudge or show some curiosity about something. And that's when you know that you've really got what a lot of people would quite typically call ownership.
So that's the first mindset tip that we're going to give you today, is when you're feeling that things have bogged down, ask yourself first, and then ask your team, if they're the ones who are struggling, where's your 51%? Seems a small tip, but that mindset change can literally unfreeze organizations, and we've seen that happen. We're going to talk about how that plays out in some of our clients in a moment as well. So what's our second tip, Moretta? There we go. So the science between threat and reward, or what we've heard about as fight-flight response, or we now know to be fight-flight-freeze. We know that that response was incredibly productive for us. You know, if the dinosaur was coming across the savannah about to eat us, it was highly productive for us to punch it in the nose, run away from it, or my personal favorite, stay still and hope it doesn't eat you. It's actually an evolutionary response that meant that our forefathers, our ancestors, did fight, flight, freeze, and they're actually the ones who survived. But of course, in the modern world of business, fight, flight, and freeze can be productive for a short period of time, but can actually become quite counterproductive. Now, Andrea, we see this with leaders all the time, where a leader is going with their team, Mary just has stopped moving forwards, or Bob is just bickering and arguing at every point. Flight or fight, or freeze response. How would we use the science behind threat and reward to get that initial reaction moving forwards?
This one's really interesting because a lot of the things that we hear as pain points in teams, particularly lately, COVID is ambiguous, it's volatile, it's unpredictable, it's complex, it's made lots of things really hard, right? So we're living in this threat state, which means that we focus on the negatives, we get a little bit more whingy, we're very black and white, we can't creatively think or problem solve our way out of problems, we forget stuff, all of these sorts of things kind of happen. And that also makes us a lot more sensitive to challenges, to our status, to wanting and needing points of choice and points of control. So the easiest thing to do for yourself, and you may well have heard this, and for your team or your organization, is to give people points of choice and to give them points of control. Now that could be which color coffee pod they put in the Nespresso machine in the shared office or kitchen if you are in the office these days. It could be, you know, what time and day or cadence they want their leader check-ins to be, but giving people some control and a point of choice, it gives us our sense of sovereignty back, I guess, our sense of, you know, personal control and power, which is really helpful. At a big picture level, if you've got a team that are really focused on problems, broken, all that black hat thinking, sometimes you need to go through a process of venting all of that and putting it to the side. So Moretta, if we can jump into the next image, an easy way to do that, either by yourself or with a team, is to get everyone kind of writing out on a Miro board virtually, on post-it notes in a room, however you want to do it, just all of the things that are happening at the moment, all of their bugbears, all of the opportunities, all of the stuff. Yeah, it's a big venting session. You can then put that onto this beautiful model of what's within our control, what's within our influence, and what are the cold hard facts, yeah, which is like the no concern bit, right? And most of the things that we tend to focus in on and complain about and see as barriers and challenges when we're in that threat state are just cold hard facts out there, no control over them. We need to have them validated and recognized. So as a leader or a team member, you can go, yeah, I can absolutely see that. That's a roadblock. That's real. I get it. You're not hallucinating. And it allows us to put it to one side. We can then focus in on what are the 2, 3, 4, 5, hopefully more things that are actually within our control, and what we say to ourselves. So our mindsets and our habits and how clear our objectives are, these are all things within our control. The more we can focus in on those, the easier it is to get into that reward state, which is essentially, I feel calm and confident and want to move towards something, as opposed to feeling like I need to run away from something.
And that's a really good example of how we get people out of that threat response, fight, flight, or freeze, just selecting 1 or 2 things that are in their circle of control that they can actually do something about today. Even if all those other factors outside of their control are still happening, puts them in a mindset of, I've got some control of this situation. We know that that stimulates problem solving. We know that that stimulates engagement. And frankly, that is the genesis of turning around culture, is helping people to realize there are a lot of things that will impact on performance, some of which we are not of our concern, some of these things that are, and some that we can influence. But actually our energy is best spent to be engaged and to be high performing around the things that we can control. So we can't control COVID, but we can control what we're doing to engage our team. We can't control macroeconomic environments, but we can control how we talk to our customers. We can't control whether our team members, family members have got sick, but we can control how we're making them feel engaged in the workplace. These are all problems, but if we focus on the things we can't control, we ultimately see teams grind to a halt and go into the state that we're going to talk about in a moment, which is called blame culture. So Moretta, if we can move forwards, for any of you who've been in organisations long enough, and if you do have an organisation where you haven't seen this before, please call it out, because I'm yet to see it in my professional wanderings. But it is very common, once these things happen, if these mindsets aren't applied, for us to go into what we call below the line mindset. Below the line mindset is actually, from a neuro perspective, very logical. It's just threat response. It's natural for us to go to blame. It's natural for us to go to excuses. It's natural for us to go into denial. And in fact, anyone who tells you that you shouldn't go there, all of the science would tell you that it's actually not in your control. But what we do know is that high performance teams, while they'll go below the line, the high performing teams have the mechanisms to get above the line quickly. And we talk about, how do we give our people ownership, accountability, and responsibility? Because we know in those moments, if we just sympathize around how bad things are and buy into that blame language of it's their fault, it's not fair, what's going wrong, while it might feel like we're doing the right thing by them to just sympathize and stay below the line, it actually doesn't help them, it doesn't help your team, and it actually doesn't help the situation. And so we talk about going above the line. And in high performance teams, you'll hear this language amongst them of when someone's going into blame, excuses, and denial, someone walking past them at the water cooler will go, right, Dave, how do you get above the line on that? And it's a reminder that the mindset says, well, what can we do in our circle of control that gives us ownership, accountability, and responsibility? What's one thing I can do right now that moves the situation even just incrementally forward? Because we know when we wallow below that line, that we lose motivation, we lose productivity, and this is when cultures start to fall apart. And we've seen very high profile examples where teams have gone wrong. If you actually start to analyze when those teams have gone wrong, more often than not, that blame culture starts to kick in. Be that in sport, be that in business, be that in personal life. going to below the line is not a choice. It's a biological response. But how long we stay below that line, that is a choice. And that's the mindset that we talk about with our teams, of how do we build a culture in our team where even as the leader, you don't even have to do it. Mary walking by the water cooler, hearing Dave having a whinge, Mary's got the tools to go, hey, Dave, what can you do to get above the line on that? And we know that language is a very, very strong indicator of high-performing teams. They share a language that's not attacking Dave in that situation, but giving to Dave the reminder, the tips, the habit, if you like, which we're going to talk about, to get above the line. Because we're not going to blame them for being below the line, but we're going to help ourselves and the people around us to get into that ownership, accountability, and responsibility mindset, or what some people have described as that growth mindset. This is the practical way of getting into that growth mindset.
So when you're in a problem-focused frame of thinking, it's about getting into a solution-focused frame of thinking, right? And think about what's within your control is one way to do that. We'll talk about small steps in habits, which is where we're going to next. But another way to do this is to just frame around what's the next one small thing that I can do that's going to move me in the right direction. If anyone has little humans and has had Frozen on repeat over school holidays, what's the next right thing? Yeah, what's the next right step? It could be just a tiny little thing, which might be, I'm not going to say those words anymore in this conversation, or it could be something a little bit bigger. Yeah, but what's that one thing, that small thing that you can do now that reframes that or that nudges you in the right direction?
All right. So we now have our objective set. We're now sharing some mindset issues. And I want to tell you about one of our clients, and for any of you who are in small business, this is a great story. We first met Craig and the team at Titan back in 2020. And they had clear objectives. They knew what they wanted to do. They wanted to get the business to a certain size, but they had grown very fast in their first 10 years and really stagnated that growth for about 10 years. They've been in business for about 20 years when we met them. They are now an amazing recruitment business, but back then were, by the owner's admission, a bit of a stagnant recruitment business in that they've been trying to grow the business from their home base of Perth to a national presence. And of course, with our connection with Beta, we talk about bringing business to Brisbane. So we started to talk to this Perth-based organisation around what's stopping you going from good to great. And we talked about some of those mindset challenges. We talked about circle of concern. We implemented the above the line, below the line mindset. We talked about how to unfreeze people. We hear when you walk around the Titan offices and you actually talk to Titan clients, where's your 51%? And as we project forward to the current day, after 10 years of stagnant growth, that business, based on these mindset changes, knowing they already had the objective set, but based on these mindset changes, have grown exponentially. They've quadrupled in size in the last 2 years, both at a top line and a bottom line. And they've finally broken the wall of WA. While they had tried to move into Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne before, they'd really struggled with that mindset piece, and they'd always blamed other factors when they hadn't gone as well with that expansion. They've now got the fastest growing business in their sector on the East Coast. And this year, we're actually looking at the East Coast outgrowing the West Coast due to the size of the opportunity in 3 short years compared to the 20 years that the previous business model had been in place. This is a great example of going from good to great by adopting some shared mindsets and starting to share a language in that business that's meant that that organisation has now achieved its goal, which was to allow the founding owner to move from a CEO role into an executive chair role. And we shared a vision with Titan when we started working with them, which was Craig. who was the owner and managing director, being able to go what we over in the East Coast would call crabbing. Over there, they call crayfishing 3 days a week because the business allowed him to get to that point. And as a medium-sized business owner, he's now achieved that goal, has an amazing management team in place, and they're growing exponentially. When you actually talk to Craig, what changed in the last 2 years, he'll absolutely talk to, and again, it's on our website, this concept of mindset, of shifting our mindset from it being everyone else's fault into what can we do and how can we take ownership, accountability, and responsibility, not just at a leadership level, but across all of their team members. Great case study of having clear objectives is a good start, but we also need to have mindset. So now, as a high performance team, you have the objectives, you've shared that mindset. What stops that good to great being realized or being sustained? And we believe that greatness is not just a moment in time, but sustained high performance. This is when we talk about our personal passion, which is the science of habits. How do we form a habit? And for many years, we didn't do enough research into that. But recently, we've really put together a lot of that research. And we know now that forming a habit follows a very predictable path that you as leaders can actually implement for yourself and for your teams. And today we're going to talk about how are habits formed and how do we turn habits from just knowledge into behavior or actions, and then how do we turn those actions into habit? So a lot of our leaders talk about, yeah, Dave, we know that. I know about good to great. I know about above the line, below the line. I know about our objectives. But when we talk about knowledge turning into behavior and behavior turning into habits, there's a science to do that. We're going to teach some simple techniques today on how you can start that process. Andrea.
So I think there's a couple of things that we tell ourselves and we have been told about habits or how we automate a behavior. Many of you might have heard of it takes a month, 30 days to build a habit. There's a number also 66 days. It takes 66 days to build a habit. You need to go for a walk every day for 66 days to really dial it in. We now know that that's actually not true. Yeah, it doesn't need to take that long, and it can happen pretty quickly when the conditions are right. And we'll talk about what some of those conditions might be. I think the other fallacy that we tell ourselves is that it's about motivation. I'm just lazy. I'm not motivated. Clearly, I don't care about it that much. Or we say these things about our team members or our colleagues. Clearly, they don't care as much. Clearly, they're not motivated. If our team aren't doing something that we want them to do, we tend to go for a carrot or stick, right? And we do that assuming it's a motivation thing. And it might actually not be. And in most cases, it probably isn't. Okay. So what do we know about habits? A couple of things. We're going to talk through 4 key elements that you can practice with any particular habit that you might want to build, whether it's a personal productivity habit, whether it's a leadership habit, whether it's a health and fitness habit, whatever it is. A couple of small little things that you can do. And we do talk about small a lot when it comes to habits because it's about the tiniest action that you can confidently do regularly. Think of it as low barriers to entry. That's what really matters. So the first thing when you're looking to build a habit is think really, really small about what you want to do. So that habit might be picking up the phone to call and talk to a key client about this big project opportunity or problem. If you think about that in its entirety, probably too daunting, probably don't want to do it, especially if it's someone new to the team or they're not used to doing that. That small step that gets you on the path to actually doing that thing might be, this is going to sound a bit old school because you don't really do this anymore, but picking up the phone, yeah, or putting in the number, yeah, getting ready to make that call. Probably don't press dial because then you might look a little bit like a stalker, but starting out really, really small. Now, that taking the first step often then prompts us to go, okay, let's keep doing it. The reason you want that habit to be really small is because even on the worst day, even when you have no bravery or confidence, even when you have zero motivation, you want to know that you're going to be able to do that tiny little seed of the bigger behavior that you want to grow. So one of the biggest challenges we create for ourselves is by going too big too fast. Yeah, we want to climb Everest and we want to do it tomorrow, and we get 5Ks down the road and we're really exhausted and tired and our legs hurt and we just don't want to go anymore. So clearly Everest was a bad idea. Yeah, that's not necessarily the case. It's about what are the baby steps towards climbing that mountain. So start small, start confident. What is the smallest example or smallest thing that you could possibly do that's going to step you in the right direction? One example I often use is if you want to be more productive and more intentional with where you're spending your time, when you sit down at your desk in the morning, pull towards you your to-do list, or sit down at your desk and write down your most important task, or open your workflow management, Asana, Monday, whatever system, and look at your most important task. You don't actually have to do it. Your habit isn't doing it. Your habit is just doing that thing of pulling it towards you.
A really key point here. We work with some pretty ambitious, driven individuals. And so when we say, right, we're going to form a habit, the biggest error we see is they go, right, if we're working on time management, I'm going to suddenly remove 30% of the meetings from my diary. And we actually say to them, if you start with that as your first step, more likely than not, it'll be your last step. So we say to them, what is the smallest possible step that you could take with the highest degree of confidence? So in that instance, it might be, can you identify one meeting this week that you could remove out of your diary? Nothing more, nothing less. The smallest step with the greatest degree of confidence. You actually want that individual walking out going, yeah, that's really easy to do. Because just like putting our shoes on to go for that run, or jumping in the car to rolling out of bed to go to the gym, the smaller we make that first step, the more likely we are to do it. The more confident we are to do that step, the more likely we are to do it. And we know one thing for certain: you cannot form a habit without creating that first step. So start small, but be confident about it.
The other reason this works is success breeds success, right? When we're self-flagellating, when we're telling us that we failed at that thing, when we've broken the diet and we're going to start again on Monday, none of this puts us in the right headspace to be stretching our capability or doing anything new. We sort of lose trust in ourselves and we need to build that back. So starting small helps us do that. Success breeds success. So whatever you need to do to feel successful, start that small, reliably small and successful. Point 2 here around define specific steps. Often we'll hear leaders say, I want to attend less meetings, or I want to be more productive, or I need to get better at using my time, or some broad conceptual statement. I want to be a better leader. I want to employ some coaching skills in my conversations. Okay, great. What on earth do you mean by that? And what does it look like? And doing that in behavioral terms and really specific behavioral terms. I want to drink more water isn't going to get you there. Saying after I make my breakfast in the morning, I'll fill my 2-liter water bottle, that will get you on the right path. Okay, so defining if this, then that is a really great way to create your recipe or your plan for the habits that you want. And if you can't get that specific, then it means there's a little bit more digging, a little bit more thinking to put in if you're going to be successful. So work-bound examples. After I schedule a team meeting, I'm going to send out an email asking for agenda items. When a member of my team brings me a problem, I will ask them, what do you think is the best way forward? Or what do you think the solution might be? I'm not going to get frustrated and tell them that they shouldn't be bringing me problems, whatever the challenging response might be. You're going to have a question to ask them. If a meeting's getting off topic, if you're off agenda, you might have a phrase ready to say. Could be just to clarify, we're solving for X here, aren't we? In terms of bringing everyone back to what you're there to do. Get as specific as possible in defining those steps that you're going to take. Okay. Step 3 here, celebrate when you do it. There's so many elements to this celebration that are really important. The key takeaway, I think, is when we are successful and we feel like we are winning, we wire in our habits so much faster. So I mentioned earlier, the research used to say 30 days, 66 days, some kind of timeline to dial in a habit. If you're going for a 5K run and grinning it and bearing it and hating every minute of it, maybe it takes 66 days. Yeah. If you're getting up and going for a 2K run in the morning and high-fiving yourself and telling yourself that you love it, or whatever celebration kind of works for you, you're probably going to build that habit a hell of a lot faster. Starting small, 2Ks is still not entirely small, but it's more achievable than 5. But that celebration is really key. So one of the things that we need to explicitly do when we're trying to build in a habit, or we're working with our team to build a habit, is what does celebration look like for you? What's going to give you this beautiful, warm, fuzzy feeling? What's going to help you feel good? My little 2-year-old loves to high five, followed by a fist pump and something else, toot toot, I think. High five, fist pump, toot toot. Whatever floats your boat, right? It's probably not that. Some people like to do a happy dance, physically or mentally. Some people like to imagine that really strict mentor or teacher saying, "I'm proud of you." Or you could do what I used to do at the gym when I would try and go for fast runs on the treadmill, and I would imagine Eye of the Tiger playing through my brain, right? Whatever works, whether it's something physical, a piece of music, a high five, play with all kinds of things that you think might work, and have a few alternatives. Yeah. If you're by yourself, you might actually high five yourself or have a dance. If you are in a meeting with some key clients, you might not do that, but have something up your sleeve instead. Celebrate when you do it. It's really key.
And it's really important as leaders here, team, to find out what celebration means to your team members. So what's going to be meaningful to them? Is it when we achieve this thing that we go and get donuts? Is it that when they achieve this first step in their habit that they get to go home early? Whatever is meaningful to them is critical. What celebration looks like for you usually won't be what's exactly rewarding for them. So asking them what is meaningful to them, so that as a leader, you can recognize those moments where they've started to form that habit or they're successfully practice that habit, and rewarding them in that way, as Andrea said, is the fast track to creating habits, not only in yourself, but also others. So we talk about saliency. Basically, do I care about this reward? If you don't care about the reward, it's not going to be a moment of celebration. If you don't care about the way, if you don't like doing the happy dance, don't fake it. Find what you like to do and do that thing. One of my CEOs, great example, whenever he does that thing he hates doing, he's got this game on his phone. He gives himself 2 minutes to play this phone game. That to him is that moment of relaxation in the day. So when he's thinking about, oh, I don't want to have that tough conversation with that team member, he knows that there's a small reward at the end of it, a small moment of celebration, a small moment of well done you. And that's what helps to form that behavior for him, is linking that slightly uncomfortable moment of doing it to that reward or that celebration moment.
Yeah, really important. What works for the individual? And I want to be really clear here. It needs to happen right precisely when you do the thing. Yeah, a lot of us think there's a reason we're talking about, we're not using the word reward here. Yeah, because a lot of us think that's like a quarterly bonus, or at the end of the month if we hit our target. you're focusing on the behavior, the inputs here, not the outputs, because the inputs is what people have control over. So as close in time, and that's why encouraging people to think through what works for them so that they can almost self-administer that is really important. As leaders, it also means when you're seeing someone, getting a closer approximation of that thing, you need to reward it, right? So you might not celebrate someone picking up the phone and then hanging up if they're a seasoned professional who's called clients their entire life. You'd be like, what's going on? Let's talk about that. If it's a grad who's never done it before, you might actually literally ring the bell, depending on what kind of space you're in, because they've made that first step. And this is what we do with toddlers when they're learning to walk, right? You take 2 steps and you fall down, and it's the most amazing thing ever. And then when that just becomes the way that it operates and we're comfortable with that, we up the ante in terms of what needs to happen before we reward. It's really important that it's as close in time as possible. The last tip here is called dial it in and repeat. Now, repetition does help, right? We know that the more often you do something, the greater the connections, the neural pathways in your brain. What I mean here by dial it in as well, though, is if you've just written out a little recipe for a habit that you want to create, I want you to do it 5 times right now in quick succession. And if you think about sports teams, they do drills all the time, right? This is exactly the same thing. If you do it and give yourself a high five, employ whatever celebration works for you, and then do it again, celebrate, do it again, celebrate, you're getting an absolute head start on upping the chances that you're actually going to do that thing. You might feel a little bit odd doing it to start with, but you're really wiring in that habit and making it really easy for you to remember to do it. Okay. All right. Last slide, I believe, on habits. Moretta, please. All habits need a spark. Yeah. So you probably heard about prompts or triggers, or if you want to get all psych nerdy, antecedents of behavior. The key here is remembering that something needs to trigger you or spark the behavior or the habit that you really want to be doing. This is why people say if you want to go for a walk in the morning, then put your gym clothes or your walking gear just like where you can see it when you wake up. It's a prompt. It's an environmental cue or spark to get you, supposed to encourage you to get up and get dressed and go for a walk. Now, there are all kinds of prompts. A lot of us, a lot of the time, rely on ourselves, aka our memory, to do things. And that is absolutely not a path to success. It's really unreliable, particularly when we are tired, fatigued, stressed, all of those things. Our memory and our ability to just kind of employ some grit, if you want to call it that, doesn't exist. Really hard, really fallible, not your best tool. You can then go to an environmental spark or trigger, and this might be putting a post-it note around your computer about that thing that you want to do, or a little reminder. It might be putting a calendar reminder into your diary. Yeah, and I have been suggesting people do this for years. I do this myself. It can work. If you've got a calendar reminder that goes off, it's like a regular daily reminder, and you're in a client meeting or you're out running an errand, or basically you're not in a position to do the behavior or the habit that you're trying to spark, then that's a wasted prompt, right? It's going to fizzle out and you're not going to do the thing. So they can work. You can't have a post-it note around your computer for absolutely everything though. So best not to rely on those in all instances. Infinitely better than your memory, not the optimal solution. The best sparks for habits are other behaviors or other habits. So particularly those things that you know you do absolutely every day, come into whatever your workspace is and turn on your computer or open your laptop is a pretty reliable one for all of us. right? We're not in the middle of a client meeting. We're not in the middle of some big thinking thing. We're not dealing with catastrophes or needs in our broader life. We know that we're there in the right place to do something. That can be a nice time or a nice prompt, a nice spark to layer in a habit, like reminding yourself what your top task is for the day, like maybe instant messaging your team to ask a question, check in on them, see how they're going. Think about if this, then that. Yeah, because the behavior, the thing that happens, that's what's going to spark your habit. And the more intentional and clear you can be about that, the more likely you're actually going to do the thing that you really want to do.
And I think the key that Andrea is pointing out here is look for those things that no matter what happens in your day, you're going to do it. It might be logging onto your computer. It might be answering an email, things that are already habits for you. If you can then link that as the prompt for the next habit, to have that uncomfortable conversation, to review your diary for which meetings you can get rid of, to think about solving a bigger problem rather than just diving into the emails. If it is something that you are going to do every day, and then that can trigger the thought of, oh, that's right, I have to do that other thing. We know that that's the most reliable spark, prompt, trigger to form out a new habit, rather than relying on, yeah, I'm just going to do that at 9 o'clock every morning, or I'm even going to rely on that reminder on my phone that goes up at 6:45 every night. We know that we get used to it and we start ignoring it. So try and tie it to that thing that you're going to do every day in the workplace. And then that's a great way to form that habit. Over time, it then doesn't need to be linked to that event because we've formed that habit already.
And this is where habit stacking comes into play, right? You just need one strong foundational habit that triggers something else. Once that's really stable, that can trigger something else. And all of a sudden you end up with this beautiful ecosystem of fairly automatic behaviors that you don't need to think about, that are propelling you towards your objectives, your vision, your dreams, your goals, whatever you want your life to look like. Again, though, starting small and really dialing in that first step and making it really strong, and then growing from there. You're not going to win by waking up tomorrow and trying to do those 20 new things. It's not going to work. Okay. All right. Case study. Over to you, Dave.
Brilliant. So a great example here. Those of us who are in Brisbane may not know, but probably by whatever measure you look at, the largest provider of early education in Australia. Most people will name Good Start. G8 would argue that on a number of measures, they're as big, if not bigger. But no one knows who G8 is. They operate about 600 childcare centres across Australia, just under different brands. And we started working with G8 again back in 2019, having worked with them in a previous life, and working with Jess, who had been the head of HR as that business has gone from 10 centres all the way up to 500 centres, and it actually decided to take on a new role. So she was having to form new habits as the head of capability. So she had to form out a whole new skill set after 14 years in the business. We started working with this concept of what are the habits that she does now? What are the habits that she needs to form in the new business? And how do we link that to that mindset and that objective piece to make sure that she's driving towards success in a way that became automatic for her? After the last 18 months of working in this new role where she's heading up workforce capability for a workforce of 14,000, never having worked in workforce capability before. Really proud to say, and again, Jess, this case study is on our website. Jess will actually go back and say, I've actually been able to completely reform all of my habits. All the things I did in the past job that weren't going to work in this new job, I've been able to identify and replace using the concepts we've talked about today. How do we start small with a high degree of confidence? How do we dial it in? How do we habit stack? all the stuff that Andrea was talking about before. So if you you are at that stage of high performance where you know your objectives and you think the mindsets in the team are right, and you're wanting that little bit of push of motivation and confidence to actually get you to go, why should I invest in habits? All of our client stories talk about habits, but I think Jess's story is quite a compelling one for you to be able to read. So, conscious of time, now is time to start getting your questions ready as we're going to move there. I've been looking in the chat function. We've all either been intently focused or all of your questions have been answered so far. Both of those are good outcomes, but it's conceivable you still may have some questions to you. We're going to leave you today with 3 practical steps of what you can do today and tomorrow to start to put this learning from knowledge into behavior and then starting to turn behaviors into habits. But before we go to that slide, we'll just dial back one slide, Beretta. Are there any questions either via the chat function or chucking your hand up that anyone who would like to ask today of either Andrea or myself?
Let's talk to next steps. So some suggested actions. If anyone's typing, then they can keep typing and we can come back to those questions.
Brilliant, brilliant. Yep, so what can we all do tonight and tomorrow morning that actually takes this from a good, hopefully enjoyable couple of hours spent together into something that's actually going to take our lives forward, that's going to take us moving in that high performance team perspective? How do we actually employ the science of habit forming? So our 3 top tips that each take no more than 20 minutes to do would be, first and foremost, can you carve out 20 minutes to begin your scorecard for success? What does success look like? How would we measure it? How would we know that we're making progress towards it? And then ask yourself, was that clear in my mind before? Was this something I was able to articulate? Is this something that my team, my manager or my direct reports would be able to articulate in the same way as I am? And if not, how can we take this concept back to them to go, do we all know where we're heading to? Do we share that shared vision of our point on the horizon? So that's 20 minutes. Again, can be done over a cup of tea tonight or over your coffee tomorrow morning. The second practical, simple tip that you could do in the next 24 hours, we know with habits that just getting started is key, is seek an opportunity to apply one of the mindset tips that we just talked about. If you're seeing a team member feeling frozen, how can you actually progress them from below the line to the above the line? If you're seeing them focusing on the things that they can't control, how can you give them focus on that one thing that they can control that brings them back to that mindset? If you're feeling that we're in a Mexican standoff within the team or between suppliers, how can we apply that what's my 51% to unfreeze that situation and to get that momentum that we all know high performance teams have? That tip should take you 5 minutes. And it's a really good way of starting to apply what we've learned today. And then finally, identify a habit you want to form. Now, for some of us, these are going to be work habits. For some of us, we've talked about life habits as well. But as a leader, dialing into this session, what is the habit I want to form? It might be to be more efficient at running meetings. It might be to be more effective at managing my diary. It might be to be more effective at asking good questions rather than just providing silence or direction as a response when a team comes to me. And then don't try and figure out how to do that all at once. Identify that smallest, most achievable change that might be possible that day. It might be, in the example of asking questions, looking for an example to just once answer with a question rather than an automatic response to a situation that you otherwise normally would have done otherwise. If it's to clearing up your diary, it might be to looking to remove that 15 minutes from your diary that's scheduled for later this week. That's a nice to have, but not a need to have. If it's about how you run a meeting, it might be walking into a meeting and going, today we're sitting here trying to achieve X, setting an agenda, setting objectives so that we have that point on the horizon. But the key is start small, celebrate that success, and then you've got the formula to be able to dial in those habits. So I'm very conscious, we said, and everyone loves a webinar that finished on time, and people are delighted with an early finish, particularly at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday. So I wanted to, on behalf of Executive Performance Partners, I wanted to thank everyone for attending today. Specifically, I wanted to mention Chloe and the team at Brisbane Business Hub for organising today. Been fantastic to make a connection with the community. Following today, for all attendees, we do have a pack of these slides, and I believe Brisbane Business Hub is actually taking this recording. So if you wanted to show small segments to your team, please feel free to do so, and we will forward that to you. Our customer experience team is on as well, and if after you receive those that information, you'd like more resources, you'd like more tips, you'd like more packs, we're big believers in giving away what we have as IP. We're more than happy to share that with you. Just contact us, and if it's, hey, I'd love to see what a proper scorecard for success looks like, absolutely happy to do that. If it's, hey, I might need some help on how do I apply my 51% here, give us a call, happy to talk it through. If it's, I'm not sure which habit I want to work on, please give us a call. We love talking to customers, current or future, and saying, hey, what's one small way that we can help you to start to form these habits? So thank you for your time, everyone. Really appreciate the feedback. The questions coming through, accessing the recording, that is now putting the spotlight firmly on Chloe, who's recording this for us, and we'll over the next couple of days get us that recording. We'll send it out via email, and I hope you got in home in time there, Christine, with the kids. And if you've got any other feedback, please let us know. Christine, that version around the 30% of the scorecard, we talk about when we're building out a scorecard, 3 versions. 30% may just be your rough draft. Think about it as your scribblings on the back of a beer coaster. But the important part there is to share that with your team. Hey, here's what I think our objectives might look like. Getting feedback from them, you can then go away and start to flesh that out to what we call a 60% version. Hey, this is what I think not only success looks like, but how we might measure it. Again, to Andrea's point, get your team engaged, give you feedback on that, and allow you to then go to that final part, which is that 90% or that final draft version, where we're not only measuring what success looks like, because we're aligned about that, and how we'd measure it, we're now starting to measure what are some of those lead indicators or some of those behaviors. If you go through that 3-step process, and it can happen in a matter of 3 days, you can go from a misaligned team to an absolutely aligned team by doing what we call 30, 60, 90. It's one of our other tips. Don't try and take to your team that 90% almost finished version. If you've headed in the wrong direction, you're going to disengage them. But even if you have headed in the right direction, you miss an opportunity to engage them. You miss that opportunity to buy in around giving direction and giving feedback. So thank you for your time today. It seems like looking at that scorecard for success seems to be the resource that we're all looking for. And that's the typical part where we would start with working with any of our customers. So we'd be delighted to help out with that. We've got plenty of examples. Please give us a call when you get that email, and we can give you the right example for your situation and your business. And Katrina and Liam and Shanae in our customer experience team are absolute experts, coming back to Andrea and the operational team and going, right, what's the best example here that'll help Susan out or Mary out or Christine. Thank you for your time, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful afternoon, and really appreciate your engagement, your feedback, and it'd be great following today's session. If you've got any questions, please reach out. We love talking to customers and to our community and seeking ways to help. So thank you, Meetap, for putting, Moretta, for putting together the slides. Thank you, Andrea, for being such a wonderful co-facilitator. And thank you to everyone for your attendance, and Chloe for setting up today. Have a wonderful afternoon all.
Have a great night.
Cheers.